My mom's new husband came into my room while I was only wearing a shirt. That's how it began. Ordinary words spoken too late about a moment that changed everything. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment what you would have done in his place. Because this story isn't about love. It's about confusion, power, and how danger sometimes hides behind a smile. My name is Alina. I'm 21. I live with my mom and her new husband, Igor, who's 46. He's not my father, but from the first day, he acted like he'd known me forever. Always attentive, always around, always a little too close. I told myself it was harmless, that I was imagining things, that maybe he was just trying too hard to be part of the family. But that illusion ended the night my mom went to my grandmother's house and left me alone with him. I came out of the shower wearing only a long shirt, thinking the house was empty. The light in the hallway was dim, and I could hear the rain against the window. I didn't even notice the door opening until I saw him standing there, silent. He didn't shout. He didn't leave. He just stared, calm, quiet, almost amused. "Not afraid of catching a cold?" he asked. I froze. "It's warm in here," I said, trying to sound casual. He took a slow step forward, eyes never leaving me. "You should still put something on," he said softly. "You're distracting." Something inside me shifted. The air grew heavy. Every instinct told me this wasn't a joke. Then he smiled. "I thought you were a child, but turns out you're dangerous." And then he left. The door stayed slightly open, just enough to remind me that it wasn't really over. That night, I couldn't sleep. His words kept echoing in my mind. Dangerous. Was he blaming me? Testing me? When morning came, he acted as if nothing had happened. He made coffee, handed me a cup, and said, "You went to bed late." I looked at him, confused. "How do you know?" "The door was open," he said, then with a smirk. "Or did you leave it that way on purpose?" He didn't wait for an answer. He just walked past me, calm, deliberate, like he was sure the game had already started. And that's when I realized something silent had changed between us, a power I didn't ask for, a danger I didn't understand, and a tension that wasn't going away. I told myself I was imagining it, but deep down, I already knew. I wasn't. All day, the house felt smaller. Every sound seemed louder. The creak of the floorboards, the clink of his cup, even the quiet hum of the refrigerator. Igor didn't say much, but I could feel his presence in every room, like the air itself had learned to watch me. He'd walk by and brush my arm as if by accident. His hand would linger a second too long when passing me a dish. Each time, I told myself I was overreacting, but then he'd look at me, not like a parent, not even like a friend, and I'd feel my pulse climb for reasons I didn't want to understand. That evening, I tested something I shouldn't have. I wore the same shirt, the one from last night. I told myself it was to prove a point, to show him that nothing he said could intimidate me. But part of me wanted to see if he'd look at me the same way again. When I walked into the kitchen, he was sitting at the table, reading something on his laptop. The glow from the screen reflected in his eyes as he looked up slowly. "You're wearing that again," he said quietly. His tone wasn't mocking this time. It was steady and dangerous in its calm. "It's comfortable," I replied, pretending not to notice the way his gaze had shifted. He closed his laptop and leaned back in his chair, studying me with unsettling ease. "You really do know what you're doing, don't you?" "I'm just getting water," I said, my voice dry. He smiled faintly. "Sure you are." The silence stretched. My heartbeat filled the space between us. He stood, brushed past me, and whispered, Not threateningly, but knowingly. "Be careful what you start, Alina. Some games don't have winners." When he left the room, my hands were shaking. I leaned against the counter, trying to breathe. It felt like I'd stepped into something invisible, something that wasn't physical, but was still consuming me. That night, I locked my door, or thought I did. But around midnight, I heard soft footsteps, a pause, then the faint sound of the doorknob moving, testing, not turning, just touching, like a question whispered in the dark. I stayed perfectly still, barely breathing, every muscle tense. After a moment, the footsteps moved away. I wanted to believe I'd imagined it, but deep down, I knew I hadn't. When morning came, I found a note under the door. No words. Just a folded page torn from a newspaper with one phrase circled in red pen. "Not everything dangerous looks like danger." I stared at it for a long time, unsure whether it was a warning, a taunt, or something else entirely. And for the first time since he'd entered our lives, I realized something terrifying. Igor wasn't guessing how I'd react. He already knew. The next few days moved like a storm that never touched ground, quiet, heavy, full of air that could break at any second. Igor didn't cross any visible lines, but he didn't need to. His silence said enough. His presence filled every corner, his footsteps behind me making even ordinary tasks, washing dishes, folding laundry, feel like traps. One afternoon, I found him fixing a loose shelf in the hallway. I hesitated before walking by. "Need help?" I asked, pretending to sound casual. He didn't look up. "No, but it's nice that you offered." Then, as he tightened the last screw, he added, "You always appear right when I start thinking about you." I froze. What's that supposed to mean? He smiled faintly, still facing the wall. "Exactly what it sounds like." I wanted to shout, to tell him to stop, to demand he leave me alone. But the words tangled in my throat. I walked away instead, my heart racing, my hands trembling. That night, my mother called. She said she'd be home the next evening. Relief washed over me, relief and fear, because I knew something would happen before she returned. When I went to bed, I left the lamp on. I was tired of shadows, of guessing what his next move might be. Around midnight, I heard footsteps again, but this time, they didn't stop outside my door. They kept moving, down the hall, past my room, towards the kitchen. I sat up, listening. After a minute, I followed quietly, my pulse pounding in my ears. From the doorway, I saw him sitting at the table in the half-dark, a glass of whiskey beside his hand. He didn't look surprised to see me. "You're awake," he said softly. "Good. We should talk before she gets back." I stood in the doorway, arms crossed. "There's nothing to talk about." He leaned forward, elbows on the table. "There's everything to talk about. You've been walking around this house pretending you don't feel it too." The words hit me like a slap. "You don't get to say that," I said sharply. "You don't get to make this my fault." His expression shifted. Less control now, more truth. "I'm not blaming you, Alina. I'm warning you. You're young. You think this is just tension, just attention. But once something like this begins, it doesn't stop where you expect." For the first time, I saw fear behind his calm. It wasn't about me. It was about himself. I took a slow step back. "Then stop it. Right now." He looked at me for a long moment, then nodded, defeated. "You're right." The next morning, he was gone. My mom said he'd left early for work, but she didn't know he wasn't coming back. Weeks later, an envelope arrived with no return address. Inside was one line, written in his neat handwriting. Some games end only when one player walks away. I never saw Igor again. But even now, sometimes, when a door creaks open in the dark, I still wonder, was he warning me or testing if I'd finally learned to close it myself? If this story made you think twice about trust and boundaries, let me know in the comments. Would you have handled it differently?